Tannins. It's a word we hear all the time when we talk about wine, right? But what are they really? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most important and maybe most misunderstood parts of wine. Think of them as the secret skeleton. The thing that gives a wine its structure, its texture, and believe it or not, its power to get better and better with age.
Okay, so I want you to picture this. You've just taken a big sip of a really bold red wine, maybe your Cabernet, and bam, instantly your mouth feels different. Kind of dry, maybe a little rough, almost fuzzy, right? Like all the moisture just got zapped away. Yeah, that feeling? That's what we're talking about today. That's tannins at work.
Now here's the first thing you absolutely need to get. That sensation, it isn't a taste. It's not like sweet or sour or salty. It's a feeling, a texture. The fancy word for it is astringency, and it is the absolute signature calling card of tannins.
So what's actually happening in your mouth? It's pretty cool science, actually. Tannins are these little compounds called polyphenols, and they have one job, one mission in life, to find and grab onto proteins. The moment you take a sip of wine, those tannins go to work on the proteins in your saliva. You know, the stuff that keeps your mouth feeling lubricated? They're like these tiny little sponges just soaking it all up. And that's what leaves you with that classic, dry, kind of grippy feeling.
Okay, so we know what they do, but where do these things even come from? Well, to really get a handle on tannins, we gotta go back to the beginning. Let's head out to the vineyard, because it all starts with the grape.
So if you look at a whole grape cluster, tannins are hanging out in three main spots. First up, and this is the big one, the skins. This is where we get the good stuff, the fine, the elegant tannins that really give a wine its structure. Then you've got the seeds. Now you have to be careful here, because unripe seeds can give off some really bitter, aggressive tannins. And finally, the stems. Sometimes winemakers will use them, and if they're perfectly ripe and woody, what's called lignified, they can add these really cool, rustic, spicy notes to the final wine.
You know, a lot of a grape's tannin level is just built right into its DNA. It's all about the thickness of the skin. Think about grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon or Nebbiolo. They have these thick skins, so they are just naturally packed with tannins. That's where they get that huge structure. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got thin-skinned grapes like a Pinot Noir or a Gamay. They have way less tannin, which is why those wines tend to feel so much softer and silkier.
But you know, it's not just about genetics. Where that grape is grown, that plays a huge part. The vineyard is so important. For instance, grapes that get a ton of sun actually develop thicker skins, almost like a natural sunscreen to protect themselves. You combine that with just the right amount of water stress, and the vine really has to focus all its energy. What you get are these thicker skins just loaded with high-quality, ripe, smooth tannins. It's pretty amazing.
All right, so we've got these perfect grapes, full of potential. How do we get all that good stuff from the grape into your glass? Well, this is where the winemaker steps in. They're like a sculptor, and tannins are their clay. They get to shape the final texture and feel of the wine.
The most important part of this whole process, it's a stage called maceration. And really all that means is how long the grape juice hangs out with the skins, the seeds, and maybe the stems. This is when the magic happens. This is the extraction period, where all that color, all that flavor, and of course all those tannins get pulled out into the juice that will become wine.
And winemakers have all sorts of tools and tricks to control exactly how much tannin they get. For instance, they can do something called a pumping over, where they basically spray the juice all over the skins. That gets you a lot of extraction. Or for more delicate grapes like Pinot Noir, they might do a gentle punching down to submerge the skins. And then there's the rack and return. That's a really powerful method for getting the absolute most tannin and air into the wine.
But wait, there's more. The grape isn't the only place tannins come from. This is where it gets really interesting. A lot of red wines are aged in oak barrels, right? Well, the barrel itself adds its own tannins to the wine. These are called exogenous tannins, which is just a fancy way of saying they come from an outside source, in this case, the wood.
And you better believe that not all oak is the same. Where the tree grew makes a world of difference. You've got French oak, which is known for its really fine grain. It gives the wine these elegant, subtle tannins and lovely spice notes. Then you have American oak, which is a whole different beast. It's much more potent, more assertive. It gives you these big, rustic tannins and those classic, powerful vanilla and coconut aromas. Two forests, two totally different styles.
Okay, so the wine's been made, it spent some time in an oak barrel, and now it's sealed up in a bottle. The story's over, right? Nope, not even close. In fact,
For the tannins, the most important part of their journey is just getting started. Time. That is the final and maybe the most magical ingredient.
This right here, this is why some wines can age for so long. Tannins are, without a doubt, the skeleton of the wine. They're its structural backbone. That structure acts like a natural preservative, fighting off oxygen and giving the wine a chance to evolve, to change, and to develop incredible complexity over years, sometimes even decades.
So how does this magic actually work? Well, it's a chemical process called, get ready for it, polymerization. Basically, in a young, feisty wine, the tannin molecules are really small and separate, and they're super reactive, which is why they feel harsh and grippy. But as the wine sits in the bottle, those little molecules start linking up, like people holding hands, forming longer and longer chains. And these big, long chains, they're much less reactive with your saliva. So what we feel is this incredible transformation from harsh to soft, silky, and velvety.
And you can literally taste this happening. Try a Cabernet that's only a year old. Those tannins are probably going to feel pretty aggressive, right? Astringent. Now, check back in at 5 years. They'll feel much more integrated, firm, and structured. But the real magic? 10+ years. That's when they've softened into something just beautifully smooth and velvety.
Hey, have you ever opened a really old bottle of red wine and seen that kind of dusty stuff at the bottom? Don't panic. It's not a flaw, I promise. That's actually the sediment from those tannin chains we were just talking about. They've become so long and so heavy that they literally can't stay dissolved in the wine anymore, so they just fall to the bottom. It's a great sign. It's physical proof that the wine has aged beautifully.
Okay, that's a lot of science and theory, but how do we actually use this knowledge? Well, this is where it gets really fun and practical. At the dinner table. Because understanding tannins is probably the single biggest key to creating incredible food and wine pairings.
The golden rule here is so simple, but it's a total game changer. Remember how we said tannins just love to grab onto proteins? Well, what happens when you introduce another protein source, like a big juicy steak? The tannins in the wine will bind to the proteins and fat in the food instead of the ones in your mouth. And the effect is just magic. The wine suddenly tastes way smoother, and at the same time it cleanses your palate from the richness of the food. It's a perfect win-win.
And this is why the classic pairings work so well. You've got your big, tannic Cabernet Sauvignon with a perfectly marbled steak, or an intense Barolo with a rich, fatty Osso Bucco, even a powerful Tannat with roasted lamb. In every case, the fat and protein in the food are taming those tannins, creating this perfect, harmonious balance. And hey, don't forget about aged, hard cheeses. They work wonders too.
But I have to give you a quick heads up. There are a few things to avoid. Pairing a really tannic wine with super salty food is usually a bad idea. The salt can actually make the tannins taste even more bitter. And be really careful with most fish. That combination can sometimes create this weird, unpleasant metallic taste. Just trust me on that one.
And one last little pro tip for you, don't forget about temperature. If you serve a big red wine too cold, it'll actually make the tannins feel way harsher. You want to aim for that sweet spot, right around 16 to 18 degrees Celsius. That's about 60 to 65 Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the tannins soften up and all those beautiful fruit flavors can come out to play. So you see, tannins aren't just about that dry feeling in your mouth. They're a story about the grape variety, where it grew, how the winemaker handled it, and how much time it has spent patiently waiting in the bottle. So the next time you pour a glass of wine, I want you to really think about it. Pay attention to that feeling. What are the tannins telling you? Are they young and grippy, full of potential? Or are they soft and velvety, telling a story of a long, beautiful life? What story is in your glass?